All right, so our topic for today is that big bear. It's the thing that nobody wants to think about, nobody wants to talk about, and I don't want to do this. Okay. So cancer is a topic for today, obviously. And when I started putting together this talk, I thought it would be manageable and we'd be able to go through everything in an hour and a half. And then I started wandering around in PubMed and all over the internet. And it turns out that this is just the most gigantic topic. So I will present what I have. We can ask questions later. Know that this is by no means an exhaustive discussion of the topic. It's what I find interesting and the things that I think you should know. So the first thing I want you to know is when I was a little girl living in an apartment building in the Bronx, I must have been maybe 5 years old. I would go with my mother and knock on doors and collect money for cancer research. Do you remember that? Okay. They're still collecting money. They're still doing research, and they haven't found a cure yet. So that was, way more years than I care to remember. And what they have found, though, is that cancer is big business. And so remember that as we go through this talk. They are really not looking for a cure. Maybe they are. They're not looking for prevention. So prevention is totally up to you because our environment has become 100 times more toxic since I was that 5-year-old girl. And cancer has become a lot more prevalent. But they have treatments, and each patient that presents with cancer represents tens of thousands of dollars, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars to the treating people, the hospitals, the doctors. So the incentive for prevention is very, very small. They want to treat, they don't want to prevent. So beware when you hear early detection. It's not the same as prevention. Prevention means you never get it in the first place. Early detection means they're just finding it at earlier and earlier stages, and therefore you get put into the pipeline. And then you are subject to the standard of care. So standard of care is not always appropriate for any given individual. Remember, you are the boss in the medical world. You get to say yes or no. You get to say how you're treated, what tests you do. So this is pretty daunting for a lay person who doesn't have the background. It's pretty daunting for me. So when I talk to people who present to me who've just gotten a diagnosis of cancer, first thing I tell them is, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to go along with your decision. If you want to do conventional treatment, I'm not opposed to that. Cancer is a big bear. And if you've got more than one bazooka to aim at it, please do. So you have to get the information. I'm not an oncologist. I don't know what drugs they're using or what are the side effects or what are the long-term effects. But you need to go to your oncologist and get that information. And then we can talk about it, and we can talk about the likelihood of, what's going to happen to you. But what I have to offer is supportive therapy for your body to get through the chemo in a less destructive way. And then let's figure out how to keep it gone. Now, of course, prevention beats rescue in all cases, no matter what the disease. So if you want to prevent cancer, you'll do all the things that we've been talking about all year. So eat as clean as you can. absolutely organic food. Did you see today, this morning, they were talking about banning some pesticide that they've been using for decades, and they suddenly found out that it harms the unborn. So whatever the reason, please eat organic. We're not making babies anymore, most of us. And so that's not the issue, but if it's bad for the unborn, it's bad for everybody. So again, organic, it's everything. You can't, once a toxin is in your body, then it has to be either destroyed or eliminated. And that costs your body something. So, you know, as much as possible, avoid it. Exercise, sweat a lot, don't add toxins like alcohol and cigarettes. Sunshine and sleep are extremely helpful for staying healthy. And then have some fun in your life. So when they talk about cancer, it's interesting. They're beginning to recognize that cancer really is anger turned in. So you've got to look at your psyche as well. And even if you do everything right, you may have a trauma from childhood that has not been processed, or something that you did that you can't forgive yourself for. So work with somebody about that. We all have those things. We're human. Nobody is perfect. And if your trauma is manifesting as a cancer, then it behooves you to get on stick and work it out. Work with it. Try something with a therapist, with a shaman, with anybody that can help you. So don't forget that the psyche is maybe the starting point of all of our things. All right, so here's conventional treatment. Now, it used to be just surgery, chemo, and radiation, which was pretty bad in some cases, very hard on the body. Now there's also what they're calling targeted therapy, which is immune, their manipulation, okay? So, for example, they are marking cancer cells for elimination. So they can tag a cancer cell so that one of your natural killer cells will recognize it and go smash it and eat it up. So that's a good thing because we're utilizing now the natural immune system. So these targeted therapies also slow the growth of tumors, it inhibits the growth of new blood vessels, and cancer needs a blood supply in order to grow. So it's thought that the old treatment, shark cartilage, was doing the cancer treatment that way by inhibiting the growth of blood vessels. Cancer-killing drugs can target cancer cells because they have certain characteristics that normal cells do not, and some excess of characteristics that normal cells do have. So it's possible to actually deliver the chemo drugs in a more targeted way. Targeted therapy causes apoptosis, which is cancer cells just self-destructing. So self-destruction is a natural thing for aging cells. They will at some point commit suicide so that their component parts can be recycled and made into brand new cells, just kind of nice. And when you have an apoptosis in a cancer cell, it's not likely to regenerate a new cancer cell. So that's good too. So targeted therapy, in terms of hormones, they talk about hormone therapy for certain cancers in the conventional world, but it really is anti-hormone therapy. They're blocking your natural hormones, so they're removing your natural hormones because they think that hormones are feeding the cancer. So these are all conventional methods. Checkpoint inhibitor is a big deal now. And this is what they look like. I'm not going to go through all of this, but like I said, I got involved in PubMed and I started learning stuff, and I just want to be able to go back and learn some more. So this is how the checkpoint inhibitors work. So in functional medicine, which is what I do, we look to support the body's defenses. We believe that the sickest kidney is smarter than the smartest doctor, as one of my professors used to say. And it's certainly true of the immune system. The immune system is way smarter than any library or any clinic or any collection of doctors in the whole world, because it's been millions of years of the development. So if we can work with the body and help the body clean up this problem, it works a whole lot better. Removing the toxins that initiated the problem. So it's like an oyster that gets a grain of sand, and after a year or two, you have beautiful pearls. But with us, we have the toxins. If we don't remove them or deal with them, they can generate abnormal cells by damaging your DNA, and then that becomes the cancer. Gut health is important to everything that happens in the body, because the gut is where we have the interface with the outside world and the inside. So that's one interface. The skin is the other interface. So gut health with the right microbes can enhance the overall health of your body. In the mouth, we also have a microbiome, and that turns out to be extremely important for many issues. When somebody gets cancer, the first thing I ask them is, do you have any root canal teeth? So root canals are dead tissue that's left in the body, and the nerve is destroyed. So even if there is infection in the pocket of that root canal, you won't feel any pain because the nerve is gone. But it turns out that very, very often there is a root canal on the acupuncture meridian that relates to the organ in question. So every organ has an acupuncture meridian, and they all go through the mouth. So the really good dentists know that. So I recommend you find a holistic dentist and make sure that you don't have any root canal teeth. Have them removed. Just take them out and let them clean that pocket. There's invariably infection in the bottom of that root canal. So I know it's not a happy thought, but I went and did it. And in fact, I had a cancer on that meridian. I had one root canal, and I had a cancer in the very tippy end of my appendix. And the only reason I found out about it was because I was having nagging pain. And I knew it wasn't appendicitis because that's an acute problem. But I got tired of the pain. So I went to my friend, the surgeon, just take it out. And he did. And we found there was a little cancer in the bottom part of it. So as soon as I could, I had that root canal tooth removed. And then, of course, the emotional issues of trauma, they damage your energy field. And that's your blueprint for life. So we're not just a chemical bag of chemicals. We're also an energetic field. And you know that intuitively, but medicine doesn't deal with that. At least Western medicine doesn't. Chinese medicine does, Ayurvedic medicine does. So we need to recognize that traumas are injuries and can damage our physical body. So here's a few things that that we can do, and I'm just naming, just really skimming the surface of all of the things that we can do to support the immune system. So if you're basically healthy, you can cycle through these and just maybe once a quarter do something nice for your immune system. If you have already undergone therapies like chemo, chemo really attacks fast-growing tissues. And one of the fast-growing tissues that chemo attacks is the white blood cells of your immune system. So the very defenses that your body wants to use to help clean up the cancer is being attacked. So colostrum is the first milk of mammals that jumpstarts the immune system for the baby. So there's human colostrum, it's not available, but milk, dairy, cow, bovine colostrum is available. And it's a good thing to do if you've had some kind of insult to your immune system. So you could take it for a month, you could take it for 3 months, you could take it for a year. I really don't like doing something forever. You want to do it in a thoughtful, targeted way, and then rotate through other things like echinacea, which is that beautiful purple flower that has immense benefits for boosting immunity. Mushrooms like turkey tail, shiitake, reishi mushroom, many of them. Turkey tail is the one that has the most literature for cancer. So those are some things you could do. Now, peptides are available online. I don't recommend that you just pick a peptide and go do it. I think you should work with a doctor that knows something about peptides. But thymulin is the peptide that reboots the thymus gland. And the thymus gland in early childhood is what teaches your cells, your immune cells, how to behave. So it's very important, and it can be resurrected later in life. It tends to involute over time and get less and less effective at what it does. So thymulin peptide can get that thymus started again. Thyroid, you wouldn't think it, but thyroid is so important for every function in the body that if you have relatively low thyroid function, it really is important to get it working correctly. And nutritional deficiencies, of course, need to be corrected at any stage for every reason. So the biggest nutritional deficiencies that, as those of you who've been coming, you hear it every time, to correct thyroid is iodine. So none of us gets enough iodine in our diet. And all of us are getting iodine mimics like bromine and chlorine and fluorine in the water and in the food and everywhere. And it will substitute for iodine if you don't have iodine, and then your thyroid hormone won't work. It'll look good on your labs. Your doctor will never figure it out, but you can. So I like everybody taking iodine, and that would be at least 3 days a week, as much as 7 days a week if you have an issue like cancer. Iodine is anti-cancer for the breast and the prostate. So it's preventative and it's also treatment. And it's very safe. You can take up to 50 milligrams a day and not get sick. So don't let anybody frighten you off of iodine. It's a required nutrient and it's very much anti-cancer. So what kind of diet? If you do have cancer or if you don't get it. So the pH, those of you who remember your high school chemistry, pH refers to acid-base balance. So neutral is a pH of 7.0. That would be water. Clean water has a pH of 7. Anything less than that is more on the acid side. So the pH of your stomach acid should be about 2, which is enough to burn the tip of your finger if you stuck it in there, or dissolve a tooth if you keep it in there overnight. It's very, very powerful acid, and it belongs in your stomach, not in your esophagus. And if you have acid reflux, you should figure out why and not just take acid blocking drugs, because the acid blocking drugs will not allow your body to maintain a good alkaline pH. Those acid molecules should be in your stomach and not in your bloodstream. So I'm a big fan of getting off acid blockers as soon as possible. But that's a subject for another day. We've covered it in the past already. So enzymes do all the work in the body. Enzymes make the chemistry happen. And our enzymes work best at a blood pH of 7.4. So if you're eating a diet that's very high in acidic foods, you're going to have to filter out the acid. And you can figure that out by buying a little pH paper. You can get that at most health food stores and some drugstores. And it's just a little strip that comes off of a spool. You tear off a little bit and you either pee on it, which is what I recommend, pee on it in the morning, or use a piece and stick it under your tongue to see what your pH is in your mouth. So, but do that before you eat so that you can get your report card for what you ate the day before. And if the pH of your urine is less than 6.5, then you're eating too acid a diet. So we know that all proteins are made of amino acids. So I'm not telling you not to eat protein. Protein is very important. But there are foods that balance that acidity. So there are charts available on the internet. I recommend you look up pH of foods, and you'll see some beautiful charts. And on the top of those charts, in the very most alkaline portion, are the cabbage family. So broccoli, and cauliflower, and Brussels sprouts, and bok choy, and arugula, and those dark green leafy things that we know are so good for us. This is one reason, because they are highly alkalinized foods. You can also drink some bicarbonate of soda, which if you have reflux, I would recommend doing that to neutralize the acid in your esophagus. But it's not a good strategy for long term, because really your body should be doing that. So if you give your body the right foods, and as it turns out, the cabbage family also contains some powerful antioxidants and anti-cancer detox chemicals. So there's some information on the side there about one product. What's it called? Resveratrol. 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 All right, so it's got resveratrol in it, and it's got sulforaphanes, which are from these cabbage family vegetables, and they help your liver to detoxify. And they're very, very good for people with any chronic problem. Cancer is a chronic problem, and autism as well. So it's for many inflammatory disorders. It's also anti-aging. So all of these good things have multiple uses. All right, so cancer actually has 20 times as much insulin receptors on its surface as our normal cells. And so it soaks up all the sugar in your blood, which is one reason why cancer patients get so thin, because the cancer is starving them out. But it's also a way to target cancer cells. So there's a therapy called insulin potentiated chemotherapy, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it targets the cancer cells. And if you've heard of the PET scan, the PET scan is how they look for cancer in the whole body. It's like a survey. And the way that it works is they're giving you radioactive glucose. So it can be picked up on a scanner. So the radioactivity. So the glucose goes to the cancer cells. It's picked up by the cancer cells. And so they light up on this scan. And that's when the doctor can tell you if you have metastases or not, because of this quality that cancer loves sugar. So guess what? One of the holistic treatments is stop eating refined carbohydrates, starve the cancer. The cancer cannot metabolize the other things that your body can happily metabolize, like fat and protein. So ketogenic diet is all fat and protein and no carbs. I don't recommend that for long term, but it's very helpful for like a month at a time. It cleans up your brain. Your brain will work much better without the carbs for a short time. And then you can add back root vegetables. So root vegetables are the right way to get your carbs, not from a box or a can or a bag or a cookie. The root vegetables have complex carbohydrate that satisfies your need for carbs, but they're released slowly. And they also have food for your microbiome. So all this indigestible cellulose, the microbiome loves, and they will thrive on it. And then you have to watch out for additives. So most of us are eating about 70 pounds of additives every year. The unpronounceable chemicals at the end of the ingredient list that are there to make the food look good or make it last longer or make it emulsify or for whatever the reason. It's a chemical that never was in food and it doesn't belong in your body. So be careful and hold the additives to a minimum. So if you do have cancer or if you want to prevent cancer, you can eat this way. It's extremely beneficial for many reasons, and it happens to be anti-cancer. So here are some treatments that I like my patients to be doing. So sauna is for detoxification. So there are many chemicals that enter our bodies and get stored in the fat or out-processed by the liver. But your liver can only handle so much. And if you're not careful, you're recycling those chemicals too. So first you have to have a clockwork working gut. You have to eliminate regularly. So whatever's going through your liver needs to be put in the toilet every day. And if that's not the case, then figure out why and make it happen. Oftentimes it's a sluggish thyroid for people who are constipated. So look at that first, take your iodine, and then see what else you need to do to get regular. But another way to get rid of these toxins is through sweat. So you can lay out in the sun, you don't need a sauna. The Florida sun is a great sweat reducer, and I highly recommend it. Don't be afraid of cancer, it's all dose related. I just read an article that sunscreen does not protect against melanoma, which is the scariest of the skin cancers anyway. So anyway, that's again another topic. I happen to love natural sunlight. And I think it's really good for us, otherwise it wouldn't feel so good. But know your skin and know your dose. The poison is in your dose. So not too much. Make sure you bring a shirt and a hat. And when you've had enough, go wash off somewhere in the ocean and in a shower. So when you get into the saunas in some of the spas, they pipe ozone in to the atmosphere around your body. You're in this like clamshell and your head is sticking out. And inside the clamshell, they'll pipe a little bit of ozone. Ozone busts up chemicals. It's a magical molecule. It's oxygen 3. Regular oxygen is O2. Ozone is O3. It's volatile. It doesn't last long, but it has magical properties to some of these chemicals, and it just destroys them on contact. So it's helpful to put it in the sauna so that as you're sweating, these chemicals are literally being destroyed and not getting reabsorbed. Chelation therapy, one of the safest and most effective detox mechanisms. It can be done orally, but that's pretty slow. It can be done IV, which can be pretty slow too, but it's a lot faster to do it intravenous. And chelation is designed to remove toxic heavy metals from the body. So those are cancer-causing molecules too. So lead, mercury, cadmium, arsenic, aluminum, all of those are toxic chemicals that are abundant in our environment and that bioaccumulate in the body. So we have no way to get rid of them naturally. They don't exist in nature in that purified form. So we need to do that. Chelation was actually invented back in the 40s, and it was FDA approved back then, and it is still FDA approved. But if you ask most doctors about it, they know nothing. They're taught nothing in school because prevention doesn't get you customers. This is a preventative measure, and if you have or you have had cancer, by all means do chelation. Do it until you're clean, and then do it every year, a few treatments. So I'll take questions at the end. So write down your questions. I'm skimming through a lot of stuff really fast because it's just way too much. So then high-dose vitamin C intravenous is one of my favorite therapies. So we need to have a couple of labs done before we put anybody through this. Number one is an enzyme called G6PD, which lives on the red blood cells and prevents them from exploding in a high vitamin C environment. So if you're not one of them, it's not so rare, but it's more common in people of African and Asian origin than Caucasians. But I've caught a few of them in my practice. So you don't want to be doing this type of therapy if you have a deficiency of G6PD, or if you have kidney disease, or you've had kidney stones, then we have to be careful about pH and that sort of thing. So for most people, it's extremely safe. There are no side effects when given IV. If you give too much vitamin C by mouth, you will have diarrhea and you won't be happy. So if you're sick with an infection, with COVID, with cancer, you will be able to tolerate a lot more vitamin C by mouth than you would if you're not sick. So what I like to tell people is, if you got a big bottle of water, put 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C in that bottle and sip on it. And then the second bottle, and if that doesn't give you diarrhea, put another 1,000 in the next bottle. So if you're drinking 2 or 3 bottles of water a day anyway, you might as well get the benefit of vitamin C, which is very powerful antioxidant and protects every cell in your body and works against infection and against cancer. So it's a very simple therapy. It's very inexpensive, it's non-toxic. I told you the one and only side effect. And if you're doing it, by mouth, you don't need to know your G6PD. You can't get enough by mouth to harm your cells. But if we're doing it IV, it needs to be tested first. So insulin potentiated chemo, is where remember I told you there are insulin receptors on the cancer cell, about 20 times as many as on a normal cell. So when you give insulin, it opens the pores on that cell to allow sugar to go in. It also allows chemotherapy to go in. So some doctors do insulin potentiated chemo, which is a great way to do it because you only have to give about 1/10 as much of the chemo drug. So if you can find a doctor that does IPT, that would be great. So, okay, then 2-methoxyestradiol, 2-MeO or 2-Me2 in the literature. I'm going to talk more about that in a bit. And then hormone therapies, they use anti-hormone therapies. We use hormone therapies. So it's a whole different thing. And it takes a great deal of knowledge and some courage to buck the system because most every urologist will tell a man with prostate cancer that we have to eliminate every shred of testosterone from your body, when really it's not testosterone that's the culprit. If it were testosterone, then young men would be getting prostate cancer because their testosterone is through the roof. And it's the older guys that are getting prostate cancer because they're turning their testosterone into estrogen. So you don't want a man with estrogen. And so they're telling them wrong things. And sadly, they're castrating, chemically castrating, and literally castrating a lot of guys. So, but hormones can be used in breast cancer. So as a matter of fact, testosterone is highly protective of breast cells, breast tissue, and can be used as ancillary therapy in the treatment of breast cancer. Likewise, progesterone. And certain estrogens. So you have to know a lot. There's one estrogen. There are 3 human estrogens: estradiol, estrone. Estradiol has a risk ratio of 1. Okay, that's considered average. Estrone has a risk ratio of about 1.6, so it increases your risk of breast cancer if you're heavy on the estrone. But estriol is the safest and actually reduces your risk by half. So it has a risk ratio of 0.5. And that one is only produced during pregnancy, but we can get it from the pharmacy. So for my older ladies who may have vaginal atrophy or bladder issues, who may have early dementia, I will use estriol to alleviate those problems, even if they've had breast cancer in the past. So you can still safely use if you monitor and if you watch. And if you know what you're doing, you can get a lot of benefit from the ladies. Okay, so IV vitamin C. So I looked in PubMed, and as of this year, there are about 206 papers on intravenous vitamin C, which is not surprising because in order to produce a research paper, it takes money. Somebody's got to pay for the treatment, somebody's got to pay for the data collection and the data mining and whatnot. So, oh, by the way, if you want to give us your email address, we can send you this PowerPoint. So you don't have to write down everything. And collect your questions. And then just give us your email and we will send you the PowerPoint. Okay, so there were mixed results, as one would think, because number one, most of the studies use a much lower dose than I would use. So they're using 10 grams IV. I might go up to 100 grams IV. And that would certainly make a big difference in the results. They did start using it on intensive care patients with sepsis. And they found that it actually saved lives. It's a non-toxic, inexpensive, safe therapy, but they don't like it because nobody has a patent on it. So it's not a big money maker. Just the fact that you can save a life is enough for something. Okay, so some of the natural molecules that we can use. We've talked about some of them. I'll talk more about 2-MeO. Naltrexone is an opioid receptor inhibitor. So it's the drug that rescues people from opioid overdose. So at 55 milligrams, you can give it up the nose, you can give it in the vein, and you will save a person's life. We use low dose naltrexone, so up to about 4.5 milligrams, which is really low dose. It blocks the opioid receptor temporarily. So we usually give it at night because it can make people drowsy or make them feel icky for a short time. So we want them to sleep through that. But what it does is it tricks the brain into tripling the amount of endorphins that it makes. So endorphins are your morphine that your own body makes. So it's a pain reliever. It's a euphoria. It just makes you feel good. And it enhances your immune system. So it's another way to get at the immune system to upregulate it. Alpha lipoic acid, very powerful for nerve cells or neuropathy. It's also a mild chelating agent. It has many benefits, and it was proposed to go along with the low-dose naltrexone as a cancer therapy. So I'll get to that again later. Enzyme therapy we'll talk about too when we talk about Dr. Gonzalez. So the mushrooms, we mentioned turkey tail, reishi, maitake, and they're readily available over the counter. Again, I don't rely on one thing. I like to rotate things, especially if it's prevention that you're doing and not treatment. If it's treatment, maybe you're okay with opening and closing 50 bottles a day and taking all those pills, but if you're just trying to prevent something, that's not necessary. Iodine, we talked about. Mistletoe is used a lot in Europe. I never really got into it here, so I can't say very much about it. But if somebody researches it and wants to try it, I'm open to talking about it. And then vitamin C, as we spoke of, 10 grams a day for cancer treatment by mouth, and up to 100 grams a day IV, maybe twice a week or 3 times a week if you can manage that. In between, that bottle of water needs to be full of vitamin C. So just sip on it so it doesn't all plop into your gut all at once. And that way you can find your bowel tolerance dose. So go to bowel tolerance. And vitamin E recycles vitamin C. So it's part of this recycled plant that nature has for us. So, all right, so then I put together a few slides that are references from that, which is the National Library of Medicine. And everything that's peer-reviewed, published all around the world is archived there. So it's like the greatest library ever. It's the Akashic records. You can go in there and get lost. years and never come out. And that's what happened to me with this dog. So here are a few recent advances. So 2-methoxyestradiol, as the name would imply, it comes from estrogen. Estradiol is the most abundant human estrogen. And when it goes through the liver, it gets detoxified. It gets, it becomes water soluble by the addition of a little methyl group. So normally hormones are fat soluble only. But if we want to be able to eliminate these hormones, we have to make them water soluble so we can pee them out. So this one is a 2-methoxy. There's also 4-methoxy and 16-methoxy, both of which are more carcinogenic than not. So the 2-MeO is the one that actually reverses and treats many different types of cancer. And they're finding out more and more every day. But if you tell a doctor about this, they won't know about it. It's not easy to find a pharmacy that knows about it. So here's another. The role of 2-MeO in health and disease. New insights, a promising anti-angiogenic, so that's the blood vessels that cancer creates in order to feed it, and an anti-tumor agent. So very interesting. This came out in 2003, and there's still very little known about it. But again, you cannot patent a natural substance. So there's no incentive for a drug company to be working with this. They're not going to be making, big money on the patents. And then here, mechanism of action. So I put them in for you to look up if you have the curiosity. Okay. So hormone therapy in conventional medicine, as I said, is anti-hormone therapy. So tamoxifen is an anti-estrogen. And when younger women with breast cancer get put on tamoxifen, they become old very quickly. Their quality of life suffers tremendously. But they're thinking that the estrogen may have initiated and may be fertilizing the cancer along the way. So their idea is get rid of it. But they don't know the benefits of the other hormones, so they never offer testosterone or progesterone to such a woman. And so she could be a lot better off and handle her therapy much better with those other hormones. So again, I spoke about the 3 different kinds of estrogen and the benefits and risks of each of them. So Dr. Gonzalez was he was a researcher originally, a journalist, and he started learning so many things about medicine that he decided he wanted to become a doctor. He could incorporate all that. And he wound up with a very, very successful cancer practice in New York City, where he was reversing stage 4 pancreatic cancers, ovarian cancers, lung cancers, things that didn't respond to anything. And he had gone way back to some of the older literature before the drugs to see what doctors were doing back in the day. And one of the things he found fascinating, I'm going to explain to you, I know you'll find it fascinating too. So when an embryo and an egg is fertilized, okay, the embryo gets implanted into the wall of the waiting uterus, right? And then it differentiates into the embryonic part, which is about to become a baby. And the part that's feeding that growth, which is we call the placenta, right? So the placenta digs itself into the uterine wall. It attracts new blood vessels, and it replicates and grows exactly like a cancer. It invades, it multiplies, it creates its own blood supply, so it acts exactly like cancer. But at one point in development, it suddenly stops growing and it starts behaving like the normal organ. And so Dr. Gonzalez was intrigued by that fact. And he did some deep dives, and he discovered that the day that the fetus begins producing pancreatic enzymes is the day that the placenta stops behaving like cancer. Wow, pretty cool. Why would a fetus need pancreatic enzymes? It's not eating food. It's not digesting anything. And it's around about 4 months of gestation, 3 or 4 months. So it's very early on. So perhaps this is the reason. The pancreatic enzymes turn off the growth signal for the placenta. So utilizing that little piece of information, Dr. Gonzalez had a twofold approach to cancer. He classified all of his patients into 9 different nutritional categories. So I don't remember what they are, but it's done for purposes. And he would put people on the diet that was appropriate for their time. And then he would feed them handfuls of pancreatic enzymes every day. I mean, just buckets of it. So like maybe 10 capsules 3 times a day. And in many cases, he managed to rescue people who were on death's door, who had no reason, no other way of surviving. They had to keep taking these enzymes. But ultimately, it was a treatment that worked. And he got to present it to some of the big oncology groups, and of course they laughed him out of town, and ultimately he died for unknown causes. He was quite young, and actually the FBI was involved because there had been death threats against him. And so they did 2 autopsies, and they never found out what killed him. So sadly, he's gone. But he's got some books that you might enjoy reading. I would totally recommend. It's only for the nutritional recommendations. Bert Berkson, who's also recently deceased, was the one that recommended alpha-lipoic acid and low-dose naltrexone. Again, I wouldn't recommend that as a single therapy, but it doesn't hurt anything to add those 2 components. Neither one of them has any toxicity. So Ralph Moss is someone that I can recommend to you for further information. He's a PhD. He has been researching cancer all of his life, and he puts out a report. It's called the Moss Report. He has a website. All of this stuff is on the website. And he has some very good, unbiased information about cancer treatment. So I think that would be a good resource for everyone. And then this is the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. And this was created, I think in the 90s, through the NIH. It was a small office for investigating alternative therapies, which is a good thing. But if you look at it, it's mostly finding fault with alternative therapies. So, it's not the most unbiased. The problem with most of these therapies is there isn't enough research. There isn't enough money to research them because it costs money to do research and the researchers have to be on board, the patients and all that. So they can always say there's not enough research. So anyway, this is another resource that you can. Okay, and the National Cancer Institute is the federal government's agency. They have good data, they have statistics and interesting information. They don't tell people what to do, but they can point you to the research. And again, mostly conventional research because that's where the money is. Okay, I think we're done. Good. All right, so now, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to look into you. Question about iodine. So you need to get a supplement that has both iodine, the element, and iodide, potassium iodide, and usually in a 1-to-1 ratio. So the liquid iodine called the Lugol solution is that. And then there are many supplements. One of them is iodoral. That's a brand name, but there are others. So look for iodine and iodine. Dosing can be anywhere from 2 milligrams to 50, but what I generally recommend is the 12.5 milligrams, which is what you find in a small capsule.
Do you mind repeating that of the supplement iodine and you said
Potassium iodide, I-O-D-I-D-E. So it's iodine combined with potassium. Yes,
You can eat seaweed, also right the seaweed where
from Costco. Yeah, I love that. So my daughter, it has iodine in it. What you don't know is what else does it.
right. Where's from?
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to get a list of all the toxins that are in there too. So it's safer to take the supplement that's been vetted and purified, but I think it's a great way to get iodine. So seafood, shellfish, and seaweed are basically the only sources of iodine at this point. We used to have iodine in the soil, but no. So especially not conventionally grown foods.
Is there a minimum dose of vitamin C that you should take every day?
Is there a minimum dose of vitamin C? I would say no, if you eat foods that contain vitamin C, because they're not just vitamin C, they're the whole package. The flavonoids, the colors, the other chemicals that help vitamin C do its job. So if you're not eating peppers or cantaloupe or citrus, or so many foods have vitamin C, then I would say probably minimum 250 milligrams, maybe more. But again, you have to ask your gut, what is it willing to put up with? So the more the merrier for vitamin C, up to bowel tolerance.
I'm not sure I heard you right. I think you said that when you're sick, you can tolerate a lot more vitamin C than you can when you're well.
That's correct, yes.
That makes me so curious. Why would that be?
Because your body uses it.
Oh, it's using it up.
It's using it as an antioxidant. So when you're sick, you're inflamed. And anytime you're inflamed, you're making free radicals, which are very damaging to everything inside. The cell membranes, the DNA, the enzymes, everything. So vitamin C mops up the oxidants. It collects the extra electrons,
Mhm.
and then it passes them along to vitamin E, or something gets recycled. So it's a very elaborate system, but it's the way the body mops up inflammation.
So if I'm not sick that I know of, can I take too much vitamin C or should I just?
Yeah, it'll be in the bathroom.
Oh, that's no, yes, okay. Good. And, I wondered if you could say a little bit more about the IV chelation. If someone has not had any of the history of cancer, but they do want to try to get rid of heavy metals, how much is recommended for a course of that? And is it just the PBTA or whatever's in there? And how does that work? And what's the sort of cost of that?
The question is all. So chelation, as I said, is FDA approved, but it will not be paid for by your insurance. Don't ask me why. They don't have to, so they won't. But I think everybody over 50 deserves to know their status. We live in a hugely toxic world, and most of us have been exposed to all sorts of things that we don't even know about. So for most of my patients, I will do a chelation. Sorry. Okay, the chelation challenge test. So chelation is done as an IV drip plus a couple of pills. So the IV drip contains a chelating agent called EDTA. So let me just back up and say, what is chelation? Chelation is a chemical process. It's a bonding of a metal to an amino acid. And it happens in the soil. The soil bacteria chelate minerals to make the plant root able to absorb those minerals. So it's a natural process. In this process, when we do it for this purpose, we're using unnatural aminos, but they have a very strong affinity for these toxic metals. So I describe them as like chemical magnets. The lead is in your bone marrow. The mercury is in your brain. The cadmium's in your kidneys. Everything's in your liver. So, and they're bound to proteins in your body. And they just stay there. So the body can't get rid of them. So we send in these strong chemical magnets that suck these bad guys out of storage and hold them tightly while they exit through the stool or through the urine. So when somebody comes to me, I like who's sick or not sick or whatever, who's curious and wants to know, I will do one IV treatment. Takes about an hour, costs about $180, $200 maybe, I don't know. But and it takes an hour to an hour and a half. And then I'll have them collect urine for the next 6 hours. And whatever comes out, we can send to the lab, and the lab will tell us, you've got a lot of lead, you've got a lot of cadmium, you've got a lot of mercury, and so on. And usually they'll come out in that sequence. Lead comes out first, cadmium comes out second, and then after those are out, then other things start coming out. So we're dealing with a pile of dirt that is in your body, and we don't know how big that pile is, and we don't know what it's made of. But we have a shovel. We're blindfolded. We have a shovel. We can put that shovel into the pile of dirt, pull it out, touch it a bit, and see if there's dirt in the shovel. And then we can start shoveling. And every once in a while, we'll check and see if there's still dirt coming out. And once we've gotten to the bottom of it, we can stop. So it so depends on your exposures throughout life. But I promise you, every person in this room can do chelation and benefit from it, especially us older guys. So it's hard to say how much, how many. The treatments run about $200 each, and if you buy a package, you can get a discount. And I'm planning on offering that as soon as I find a nurse to do it. But that will be the first IV that I will be offering. So it's hugely important. It's very preventative of cancer, of dementia, of chronic illness of all kinds, because these metals are toxic, and that means they interfere with the metabolism and every possible thing that goes on in your body. This is one of the most powerful detox methods.
I still, thank you so much for that. So what the IV part of it is what? You're just putting it in the EPTA slowly?
Yes,
Because my dad had two brothers, and one of them, who lived much longer, never got dementia, always did this. They were also much older, but he did it in California, but he laid there, and it, like his blood was taken out, and he laid it and then put back in again, like he was, it was weird. So that's why I was curious.
I've not heard of it on that.
So that was a long time ago.
That sounds more like ozone.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so the EDTA is just going into the body,
Right.
then you collect the urine for 6 hours, back goes to a lab.
Right.
And then,
And then there's so the EDTA gets everything but mercury. Mercury is better chelated with a different agent, which we give as a pill. It's called DMSA. It's not important, but that's good for mercury. So some people have a lot of mercury and not a lot of others. But if you have had fillings, silver fillings in your teeth, or if you eat a lot of fish, or if you've lived anywhere near a coal-fired power plant or forest fires or anything burning, you've got mercury. So it's just inevitable. We all have these things. And as I said, it's one of the best detox and preventative methods. Yes.
What if you still have mercury in your teeth? Is it still gonna keep coming out then?
Yeah, it will. If you still have mercury fillings, you should have them removed. Every time you chew, a little bit rubs off and you swallow it. Every time you brush or your dentist cleans your teeth, you're getting a dose of mercury. So you've got a lifetime's accumulation right now. Even if you don't remove those fillings, you can get rid of what's in your body. And then you can start reaccumulating. So it's best really to have those fillings removed, but again, by a holistic dentist. It's very important.
so you're talking about the low dose naltrexone with alpha lipoic acid as a treatment or as a prevention?
Adjunctive treatment,
As a what? Adjunctive treatment.
adjunctive treatment for cancer.
I recently had a conversation with Jerry at the Sarasota Special Pharmacy, and he had said that I was asking for somebody who had really bad arthritis, and he said that people were using low-dose naltrexone to help people with severe arthritis. It's being used for quite a few.
It's used for a lot of purposes. It's extremely beneficial for autoimmune disorders like arthritis. So, yeah, and we don't even know all the things it can be used for. But it's fun to play with these things that are non-toxic, not very expensive, have very little downside risk, and can have tremendous benefit, as opposed to, conventional treatments that can really wipe you out and make you crippled for the rest of your life. So that's, it's an adjunctive treatment. It's not a standalone treatment.
For reducing tumors, or where does it interrupt that cycle? Do you know?
I don't know. It's beneficial for upregulating the immune system, and it has tremendous antioxidant properties. So beyond that.
Do blood tests help determine the load of heavy metals or hit the high?
So how to measure the heavy metals? Very good question. Because they're stuck in your tissues, we would have to do biopsies to really find out. When you do a blood test for heavy metals, you're seeing what's in circulation at this moment. And things don't stay in circulation for very long. They get pushed into storage so they don't do damage to the whole body. So you're really not getting the right picture. You have to pull it out and then measure it. So that's called a provocation test. We're provoking the excretion and then we're looking at it. So every chelation treatment is the same, but the challenge test is the treatment plus the urine collection. And I like to do those every 10th treatment. So you do 10 treatments, then we see if the numbers are coming down and where you are we done maybe? And it really, as an anti-aging strategy, I recommend 10 treatments a year. So the first year you might want to do 20 or 30. See, you get clean, but you're still being exposed. You know, automobile exhaust, the cigarette smoke, airline fumes, all that, everything has heavy metals in it, and so do the plants and the water. So really, it's impossible to avoid.
Is it even able to take out the PFAS?
No, those aren't heavy metals. Those are chemicals and would be more amenable to sauna.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
The first one is, I'm retired. I'm on a fixed income. Do you prioritize, because I could report all this, do you prioritize what would be the most important? That's number one. Secondly, my thought is, if these toxins are stored, why would you want to disrupt that, cause them to start circulating when you start pulling them out through chelation? Those are my two questions.
Okay, so I'll take the second one first. Okay. Because they're still doing damage in your tissues. They're not neutralized. They're just sitting there creating free radicals day and night. Okay, so they are dangerous. So it's beneficial. Plus, when you're chelating them, you're grabbing them and getting rid of them. So they're not circulating for very long. They're out and in the toilet pretty quick. So every treatment gets you a little cleaner. As far as the costs, prioritization is key, but we have to do some testing to figure out where to start with any given individual. So, you know, so I have what I call the longevity report card. And there are quite a few tests that we can do to figure out a baseline and then figure out what would be the best bang for the buck for you. And then you have to figure your budget. So, and then I would start, you know, lobbying those insurance companies. Why aren't they paying for this? It's FDA approved. It's recognized. It's been there for, you know, 80 years now. It's been, so why aren't they paying for it? But meantime, you know, if you can only do 5 treatments, do 5. Yeah, many questions, but a lot of it has to do with your own individual situation.
So the longevity report card
Uh-huh.
and the test in that, what would that cost?
So I haven't figured it out yet.
Or it's mixed in with that.
Part of $1,000. So that would give you your brain function and your telomere length and your biologic age and a whole panel of risk factors and regular tests that any doc would do, and then a whole bunch of other tests.
Did you say that was 1,000?
Yep, that's the plan. So that you can really see. And then I also want to put a glucose monitor on you for 2 weeks so you can see the foods that are spiking your blood sugar and get a sleep tracker for you so you can see what quality of sleep you're having. So now we're off the cancer thing, but it's all of a piece. You want to be healthy. This is what you need to know. Yes.
And if you're relatively healthy and you don't have cancer, and you eat a little sugar and a little carbs.
That's up to you, my dear. I must admit, I was so happy the other day. Something happened that made me happy, so I went and I got a pint of Haagen-Dazs, and I ate the whole thing. And the next day I paid for it. So I don't do that often, but once in a while you have to. You know. I do believe in the 80-20. If you're good 80% of the time, 20% you can screw up.
How would you know if you have cancer if you don't have a lump or anything?
Excellent question.
Cancer?
Excellent question. How would you know? And you know, there are a lot of things that can be done to look for cancer. Yeah, they call them cancer markers. There are certain chemicals that cancer cells give off, certain types of cancer cells. So they can do what they're now calling a liquid biopsy, which is nothing like that. It's just looking for cancer markers. Helpful for some of the more common ones. Cancer screening is the traditional way. So they used to do chest x-rays every year to look for lung cancer. Now they're doing mammograms every year to look for breast cancer. To me, that's creating what you're looking for, because radiation starts cancers. So I would look with a sonogram. By the way, we are getting thermography in my practice. We're going to be booking thermography for the end of this month and then every month thereafter, which is a cancer screening for the breast and for other body parts, thyroid, for example. It can show you if you have hidden tooth root infections. It can show a lot of interesting things besides just breast thermography. So yeah, cancer screening, the famous colonoscopy, you know, or the Cologuard. You have to look for it, because cancer doesn't just start out of the blue. It's a process. And for those of you who remember some of the earlier talks, there is a progression of disease that Dr. Reckoway had put together that starts with like a runny nose and ends up with cancer. There's a whole progression, which is really interesting because at any point in the progression, it can be reversed and cleaned up, and they never tell you that. So where does cancer come from? It comes from chronic irritation of some sort. So it could be the heavy metals that are just sitting there creating trouble all the time. Or it could be cancer causing chemicals, which are everywhere. Or it could be, you know, it's not your genetics suddenly exploding because your genes don't change. It's the expression of those genes that changes. It's which genes are being read and which ones are damaged. So, good question. There is no great test for cancer. The whole deal is to stay healthy, do the surveillance that you're comfortable with, the cancer testing, and take good care of yourself. So once it's established, then we can do all the things that we talked about. But it's best not to get it in the first place.
I only have one question.
Yes.
If your body is already very acidic, can you still take vitamin C?
Good question. Very good question. So yes, the answer is yes, because it can be neutralized if you're eating the right foods. But the whole thing is to look. Get that little pH paper. It's a couple of dollars. And pee on it every morning and see what you put together yesterday. And then when you figure it out, eat more cabbage and eat more of those better foods. But don't stop eating protein. You can stop eating the other acid form foods. So like Coca-Cola. Yeah, okay, great. So I hope you're armed now with some more information and some determination to be kind to your body. Your body is incredibly smart. Respect it. It will announce to you if something is wrong. Pay attention and look into it and find the right people to help you on your journey. It's your journey, not theirs. Don't let them railroad you into anything that you are uncomfortable with. Do your research. Funny, isn't it? They will pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for cancer treatment, but not one penny for prevention.
Thank you, Carol.
My pleasure. Thank you. Oh, let's not forget about the doggies. Yeah, so there's a little basket over there, and whatever's put in there gets to the Humane Society. So that's, I like to do that for them. Animals are so much nicer.
I'm sure that's.
Thank you, sweetie.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a question. Sure. You know, the graphic sometimes, is there something causing that? Things change now. It's crazy. I have a little bit of it. We take a lot of time.
Doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. It's
Kind of weird. Don't they say the tongue is kind of the big?
well, the Chinese doctor gets a lot of stuff.
Oh.
Yeah, no, if you're taking their vitamins.
You would get B12 and, I actually take alcoholic acid, take like 2 times a day. I'm hoping that's helping. Regenerate.
It will help and yoga. Range of motion.
That's the idea. It's stretch. Thank you very much. It's very informative. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.